All right, hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Rob, it's Smirking Gun Reviews, and we're back with more of the Americans' final season, season 6. We're doing episode 4, Mr. and Mrs. Teacup, and it's full of spoilers, so if you haven't seen the episode, I highly recommend checking it out and then watching this. So, throughout this episode, you get the feeling that although the noose hasn't been tightened yet, it feels like it's looming very close with what they're getting involved in, with the way the storyline is being headed. You definitely know this is a final season. If they hadn't already said, like at the beginning of the season, the final season of the Americans. But with what's going on in this, it's pretty clear that we're ramping up towards the end. So in this we got Oleg and Philip talking. That was how the last episode kind of ended, I believe. And this is where Oleg and Philip Philip is being educated really about what's really going on within the government and what the center is doing and what the actual people of Russia are kind of wanting. So the center that they've been working for forever has been part of the old Cold War and communism, and just basically, the fight between the Americans and the Russians. And now that political climates have majorly changed in the time that they've been there, because let's remember, they've been here for like decades now. And so everything that they've been doing up until, recently has been for the old way of doing things. And so after all this time, it's very, very hard to accept that what you've been doing now is so fundamentally changed and about to become obsolete with the whole thing with Gorbachev. And that's what Oleg is trying to tell him, is that people are trying to stop change, good change. It doesn't mean that they're all going to become Americans, but they are on the cusp of getting freedoms that they've never had before. Things that, to fix their country, positive things, but that the center is still part of that old way that they've been doing things. And that's who Elizabeth is working with. And while she would never be, like they talk about how she'd never be disloyal to her country, that she could easily be manipulated and used by her by the center and other people that don't want real change, that just want to stay where they're at and just, keep going with a Cold War that is not going to be the same anymore. They haven't seen the writing on the wall. But there is some, and since we know, like we know what happened, we have to remember they don't know what's going to happen. So, it's hard for them for people like Elizabeth to accept that what what you've been doing is over, essentially. And what does that mean for your life? That you've been doing for the past 20 years? You could have been living a life, but it's hard to wrap your head around that and not just be stuck in your ways. And Philip now is torn because he's tried to talk to her, but she's just not having it. And with Paige involved now, it's just doubly hard. So we have Philip going to see the girl that he used to, kind of was one of his sources. He went in there to, get information from her dad. And so it's nice to see her back in the show for just a second. She's the one who plays Ruth on Ozark. But the big part of this, I think one of the major scenes in this is when Elizabeth and Paige and the rest of her group are, they infiltrate this place to get what I assume is the radiation detector that the general was was supposed to give them. Now, I haven't seen Elizabeth take a risk like this in a while. I feel like it's been a while. And this is pretty hardcore because, yes, they have this all worked out. They get inside, she gets inside the facility, But then she just starts dropping dudes. Like, she's taking out light bulbs, she's looking for the thing, and I mean, she just starts dropping guys. And I kind of forget the final count. I think it's like 4. It's like 3, 4, maybe possibly. I don't think it's 5, but I could be wrong. I mean, she kills like 4 or 5 people in this attempt to get this thing, and in the end, she doesn't even get it. It's another example of the failures that can happen on these kind of missions. But I mean, she dropped 4 dudes, innocent people doing their jobs, and she didn't even get what she went to get. And that is one of those things about Elizabeth. You know, we're talking about the old ways of doing things and stuff. That she just can turn that part of her brain off. The cold part of her. The stone cold killer part of her that will do whatever it takes for the mission. And you know, I don't think she's telling Paige, like the same thing with like how she said that the general killed himself. I don't think she's telling her, hey, guess what? I killed like 4 or 5 guys on this mission that I failed at. And that's, you know, where Philip comes in, and I love this scene because it's just Philip kind of having enough of like, he's trying to let Paige know without having to directly tell her, you know, like, your mom's saying that he killed himself, why? And he doesn't want to come right out and say, your mom blew his face off. He's hoping that she gets there on her own. But Elizabeth has got her pretty much where, unless Philip comes right out and says it, she's not going to get there. And this just furthering dividing them, even though Philip really wants to be able to help her and, you know, whatever. We also get, you know, him telling Henry about the money problems, that things, you know, he probably can't afford to go to his school, that he's, you know, the private school that he's at, because of all the money. And I feel like this is definitely a way for the writers to just go, okay, well, the American dream isn't working anymore for them. The business is not working, and it's an easy way for them to write an out. You know, it's a lot easier in a situation where they're probably going to have to be on the run. If your business failed, if your business is booming, it's a lot harder to let go of things. If your business is failing, when the shit hits the fan later in the season, which I can only assume it's going to, much easier way to write yourself out of at least that part of the story. Speaking of on the run, probably because of things that are going on. So Elizabeth gets the recording from Philip from that girl's place, and it has to do with Mr. and Mrs. Teacup, which is the defector that Stan has been now begrudgingly having to go between him and his wife, the hockey player, the courier. They know now that he's a defector, and they've got to follow. Elizabeth's being tasked to follow Stan, who they've known all this time, and they've never had to get this close to actually being, you know, in a while with him, especially since he's been out of counter like terror, you know, like that kind of thing. It's a bad idea. But again, you knew, I guess, in some way that it had to go this way. Like they would have to get close to Stan in some way, and this is it. They want them to deal with the defector. And so they've got to start following Stan. And this, to me, like I said, it's a bad idea. This is how Stan finds out. It has to be. I do like Philip and Stan's little meeting at the bar, talking about money problems and things like that. I do also like how Paige is trying to work out like dating and sources, and when is it, you know, like if you like somebody, don't mix the two. Like if you want to use somebody as a source, use them as a source. Don't fall in love with them. You can't mix that shit up. And I do like that Elizabeth is telling her, you're not ready for this. You're not at that level. And Paige will never be at that level. Thankfully, this is the final season, so I doubt we're going to see a full-on spy Paige. but I don't know. Now, to deal with the negotiator and his wife, as Elizabeth is still posing as the nurse there, she's desperate to get more information, and she pushes for this party and everything, and so they get the guy's code and they put the wiring in it and like all this stuff, and the party just goes terribly because the wife starts hacking up a lung. So they don't even get information. Elizabeth's stuff is not working. It keeps failing, and she's getting more and more tired. So even the recordings that she gets, the information in there isn't worth it. It's just regular people talking. So I don't know. It's crazy. This isn't like some action-packed thing, but it does have some pretty intense moments with the whole infiltration sequence. And, just the whole thing about following Stan around, it's going to be pretty crazy. So, anyway, that's it for this episode, really. If you like this video, please hit the like button, comment, share, subscribe. I'm not getting a lot of views on this, but I don't care. This is a really good show. I really hope eventually some people watch this and watch these reviews, because it's really worth talking about. It's a real big shame that nobody is really watching this show. I guess that kind of factors into the views you get on an episode like this, but hopefully someday people will finally catch on to this show. So anyway, this is Bob for Smirking Gun Reviews saying we'll see you on another episode of The Americans. Otherwise, we got Disenchantment coming up today, later, maybe even later tonight, or technically tomorrow. We got Man in the High Castle, we got Ozark. I just did a review for the movie Hostiles, which I'm really, it's starting a new kind of thing for me. And that's about it. So we will see you on the next video, and have a great night. Bye.